This week, we remember the service and the sacrifice of those in the armed forces and all those who have died as a result of conflict. I wanted to take this opportunity to share with you some of the stories of our Old Elizabethans and how their worlds changed on the 3rd of September 1939.
I have to tell you now, this country is at war with Germany.
Early in September 1939, my first term as a sixth former, war was declared. There was an initial flurry of activity, with gas masks being issued, younger children being evacuated, and tapes stuck across windows. I joined a small group of volunteers who filled sandbags from sand dumped on the drive. These were used in the room at the bottom of the stairs from the day boys' entrance, which was given an inner frame of heavy timber to make a bomb-proof shelter. The school decided to turn all pupils into day boys and to send the boarders home, and volunteers were called to become fire watchers. I was one of those who volunteered. The job of fire watchers was to guard the roof of a building and try to put out any incendiaries that arrived with buckets of water and a stirrup pump. I was on duty on the 24th of November 1940 when one of the big raids took place. About 150 German bombers came over in several waves from about 7 p.m. Park Street was badly damaged and the museum was hit. The heart of the old city down at what is now Castle Park was completely devastated. We slept fully clothed in the bomb-proofed room. When the sirens went, we had to go up to the yard and take up a position near the toilet block, from where we could see most of the school. Luckily, the school was not hit.
It was down here in the cellars of the school that the boys sought refuge and hoped to survive the night. It was due to bombing in Plymouth that one Old Elizabethan actually ended up here at QEH.
It was in spring of 1941, when I was 9 years old. I was living in Plymouth with my mother and younger brother. Now, Plymouth was a major naval base and under constant attack from the German Luftwaffe. The council had made as much provision as possible for the safety of the residents by constructing air raid shelters throughout the city. On the night of the April the 22nd, the sirens sounded as usual, and we trooped in down to the shelter, went in through the east entrance and went along one of the corridors, and I bumped into one of my school friends. So we sat down and made ourselves comfortable on the wooden benches there. And then an area warden came along and said to my mother, "These children," because my younger brother was only 3, "these children should be in bunks at the west end of the shelter." And my mother said, "No, we're happy here, we're settled, and in any case the bunks are damp." So we stayed where we were. Anyway, the night wore on, and suddenly there was a most enormous explosion. All the lights went out, and we were covered in thick, choking dust. We stayed like that for some hours until dawn, when the rescue services managed to uncover the exit, the eastern entrance, which was blocked by rubble, and we were led out into the dawn. And it was then we learnt that the western end of the shelter had been hit by a very large, high explosive bomb. It had killed everybody who was in the bunks sleeping. I think the death toll was somewhere around 76, 78. It was the worst disaster to befall Plymouth, the air raid shelters, during the war. So we went back to our flat in our house, went in and found it completely covered in dust, absolutely thick. And we found a huge hole in the ceiling, some about 6 foot diameter. Suddenly, air raid warden burst in and said, "Out, everybody out, unexploded bomb." So, without a moment, we had to get out. Couldn't collect anything. Well, all we could do was go to the railway station, get a train to Bath, and go and stay with my grandparents. We stayed with them for some months, and we finally moved to Bristol. And that was late 1941. And 2 years later, I was lucky enough to get to QEH. So I always say that the reason I got to QEH was thanks to the German Luftwaffe.
Whilst Peter and Aubrey were having to contend with the worries of life on the home front, boys just a couple of years older were already signing up to fight in the war. By 1941, over 200 Old Elizabethans were serving in the forces. Two of these OEs were William Bracker and Robert Dufty. I've come across here to our archives room at school to find out a bit more about both William and Robert. Here we have the admissions book, and we can see both their names listed under the intake of 1931. W.A. Bracker, William Bracker, and on the following page, R.J. Dufty, Robert Dufty. Year groups at QEH would have been a lot smaller back then, so I think it's safe to say they'd known each other very well. I think we can also say confidently that both boys excelled here at QEH. We look through old copies of the Elizabethan, there are numerous mentions of both of these boys. In fact, we've also found a prize-giving programme from the year 1935, and if we take a look inside, we can see William's name mentioned. He didn't just win one prize, he won 2 prizes that year, for religious knowledge and also for mathematics. William, though, didn't just excel academically at school. He was also a prominent member of the League of Nations Union, a member of the Literary Society, the Debating Society, and he starred in the school play She Stoops to Conquer. Both William and Robert were also very sporty. We found prize-giving programmes from the years 1936 and 1937. When they had come to the end of their time at QEH, William competed in the final for the mile, and Robert came second in the finals for the 100 yards and also the 220 yards. Both boys played rugby for the school, and both represented the school at first team level. We know that Robert left QEH in 1937, and he got a job working for Christopher Thomas Brothers, a leading soap manufacturer in Bristol. His dream, though, was to fly, and so on the eve of war, in 1939, he enrolled in the Royal Air Force.
The work of the Bomber Command grows daily in importance as the Air Force carries the war into enemy country. The flag of the RAF against a cloudy background is a guarantee that Germany's war targets will be still harder hit with every week that passes. It's here that the bomber crews get the groundwork for unfailing accuracy later on. The work is interesting, to say the least, and it isn't a bit like school days, because everybody in this school is really trying to learn.
It should never be forgotten, of course, that hundreds of thousands of German civilians perished in the Allied bombing raids during World War II. But at the same time, it should also be remembered that the contribution of the Bomber Command crews was fundamental to the war effort in terms of disrupting military production, industrial production in Germany. The famous Dambuster raids, of course, in 1943, and also as crucial backup for the Allied D-Day landings in 1944. It was absolutely dangerous for all aircraft crew, and in total it's estimated that about 60% of Allied crews on operations were either killed, seriously wounded, or were taken as prisoner of war.
From research in old newspaper archives and on the Royal Air Force website, we know that on the evening of the 21st of February 1941, Robert was flying from Oxfordshire in an Avro Anson, his role to train bomber crews in night flight training. Unfortunately, training could have as many dangers as combat. It involved flying with inexperienced crews in often old aircraft. As their plane reached North Wales, it crash landed. Robert and the other 3 members of the crew were all killed in the accident. Since leaving QEH, we know that William had also joined the Royal Air Force, becoming a sergeant pilot working with the Coastal Command. William took off for a routine patrol from Norfolk at 9:20 p.m. They were going to patrol from Emden to Rotterdam. However, on this evening, there was thick fog, and the plane soon ran out of fuel. In the Western Daily Press, William was reported missing. His mum, back in Bristol, must have been clinging on to any hope of a miraculous survival. Devastatingly, any hope was dashed a month later when William's body was washed ashore off the Yorkshire coast. William and Robert, the two boys who had started together at QEH just 10 years before, had died within 10 days of each other. The news was broken to the QEH community in the April 1941 issue of the Elizabethan. It's with extreme regret that we have to record the loss of two old Elizabethans, who though young in years had already given sterling service to their country. We all feel a grievous sense of loss that such promising careers have had to end so prematurely, but we are intensely proud of the loyal and devoted service which they were so ready to give to the nation and the school they loved so well. We found this old issue of the Western Daily Press, and we can see an article about William's funeral. Just below the article, however, is a large advert for the Royal Air Force, encouraging men over 17 and a quarter to play their part in the greatest struggle of all time. Over the next few years, more old Elizabethans would follow suit, leaving QEH to fight in the war. The QEH rugby team photo from 1939 shows another OE who would die in conflict. Here we have Maurice Ratnett, who died aged 21. Besides Maurice in this photo is Peter. It seems unbelievable to think that if these men hadn't died so young, they could still be with us today. The next time you walk along the Heads Landing, take a moment to look up at the war memorials. The names listed on the board are more than just names. They are all boys who sat where you are sitting now, who played for the same rugby team, who dreamt of bright futures.